The snow bit into my face like 1,000 tiny knives, whipping through the air in a fury that turned the world into a white void. It was the winter of 1885, deep in Shadow Canyon, Wyoming territory, and I'd ridden straight into hell. The blizzard had come on sudden, like the wrath of God himself. But it wasn't the storm that nearly ended. MIT was the outlaws. 3 of them, shadows in the gale, their rifles cracking like thunder as they ambushed me on the narrow trail back to my cabin. I felt the burn of a bullet grazing my shoulder before I even drew my revolver. Damn you. I roared into the wind, my voice swallowed by the howl. My horse reared, panicked, but I held fast, firing back blindly. One outlaw dropped with a guttural cry, his blood staining the snow red. The others scattered, but not before another shot whistled past my ear. I spurred my mount hard, heart pounding like a war drum, escaping into the blinding white, the isolation of the canyon my only ally. Peril clung to me like frost, a reminder that, out here, a man was always one wrong turn from the grave. I made it to the cabin by sheer grit, slamming the door against the storm's rage. The wind screamed outside like vengeful spirits, rattling the shutters as if the dead themselves were clawing to get in. I was Elijah Thorne, a rugged widower at 35, scarred by the Civil War's bloody fields and the quieter losses that followed. My hands, calloused from years of hard labor, trembled now as I bandaged the graze on my shoulder. The cabin was my fortress, isolated, perched on the edge of the canyon like a sentinel against the wild. Logs I'd hewn myself, a single room with a stone hearth, a bed in the corner, and shelves sparse with necessities. No frills, no softness, just survival. The war had taken my youth, and a fever had stolen my wife, Sarah, and our unborn child, 3 years back. Their ghosts lingered in the silence, in the empty spaces where laughter should have been. I hunkered down that night, the fire crackling low, feeding at logs to chase away the chill that seeped into my bones. Loneliness was my constant companion, a weight heavier than any saddle, but I'd learned to carry it. Out here, a man didn't whine. He endured. Morning broke gray and unforgiving, the blizzard spent but leaving drifts piled high against the door. I shoveled my way out, boots crunching in the fresh powder. And that's when I found it, a stiff envelope, wedged under the doorframe, dusted with snow. No rider had come in that storm. Whoever delivered it must have braved the edge of it and slipped away without a word. The ink was smudged, the script plain and unadorned. I stared at it, my breath fogging the air, but didn't open it right away. Chores first, always chores. I fed the horse in the lean-to barn, mended a loose board on the porch where the wind had pried it free, and sharpened my axe on the whetstone. The canyon stretched out below, a vast, shadowed gash in the earth, pines standing sentinel like old soldiers. Only when the pale sun climbed higher did I sit at the scarred pine table inside, knife in hand to slit the seal. The words were brief, clinical. Sir, your request has been processed. A bride has been located per your specifications. Estimated arrival, late April. I read it twice, the paper crinkling in my grip. I hadn't sent for love, that fool's gold had burned me once. Not even companionship, really. What I wanted was resilience. A woman who wouldn't balk at the wild land's cruelty, the endless silence, or the ghosts that paced my nights. Someone with hands that worked, eyes that didn't flinch from hardship, and a spirit that wouldn't shatter at the first crack of thunder or sorrow. I'd seen enough fragility in Sarah's final days, her fevered whispers fading like smoke. No, I needed presence, not passion. The wind pressed against the cabin again, low and insistent, as if urging me onward. I folded the letter away, stoked the fire, and wondered if such a woman even existed. As the weeks dragged on, winter clung stubborn to the canyon, but signs of thaw teased the edges. Snow melted in patches, revealing muddied earth beneath. I kept busy, hauling wood, checking traps for game, but the anticipation gnawed at me like a hidden wound. Doubts crept in during the quiet hours. What if she saw the scars on my soul and turned tail? What if sharing this haunted world only amplified the emptiness? Late March brought the first real peril since the ambush. A warm spell hit sudden, melting the high drifts too fast. I woke to the roar of water, a flash flood barreling down the canyon walls like a living beast. It slammed against the cabin's foundation, muddy torrents clawing at the logs I'd sunk deep. No, you don't, I bellowed, grabbing ropes and stakes, wading into the icy surge. The current yanked at my legs, nearly pulling me under as I hammered reinforcements into the earth. Water filled my boots, chilled me to the marrow, and for a terrifying moment, I slipped, head dipping below the foam. Lungs burning, I clawed back up, spitting curses, muscles screaming. By grace or grit, I secured the place, but I collapsed on the porch afterward. Soaked and shaking, the near drowning a stark reminder of how fragile life hung in this wild place. If she came, she'd have to face this tooth of land, didn't coddle. April crept in with a sky like bruised slate, the scent of thawing earth rising from the gullies. The road to the nearest stage stop, a dusty frontier outpost called Dust Creek, was little more than ruts carved by wagons and time. I rode down on the appointed day, hat pulled low, coat worn threadbare. I hadn't shaved since the blizzard, my beard a rough shield against the world. Words had grown scarce in my solitude. I figured a dozen in 3 weeks was plenty. The stage groaned to a halt, horses snorting steam, and she stepped down without a hand from the driver. Clara, the agency had named her. No frills, just Clara. Her dress was simple, homespun, faded by sun and sorrow, boots scuffed, like they'd walked 1,000 miles of trial, hair tied back, practical, face set not hard, not soft, just enduring. She carried a satchel, nothing more, and her eyes scanned the sparse crowd before locking on mine. I nodded. Elijah Thorne. She stepped closer, voice steady as a rifle shot. I'm Clara. I took her in the line of her jaw, the wear in her shoulders that spoke of burdens carried without complaint. Something stirred in me, unbidden, a flicker of curiosity amid the caution. You're early, I said, my words rough from disuse. Road cleared sooner than expected. No smile, no chatter, just facts. I gestured to the wagon hitched nearby. We'll ride from here. She climbed up without hesitation, settling beside me like she'd done it 100 times. The ride back was quiet, the canyon's rugged trails winding through deepening shadows. Unspoken tension hummed between us, questions, unasked, pasts who was she running from? What ghosts chased her here? My mind raced, building curiosity like a gathering storm, but I kept my eyes on the path, letting the silence stretch. The cabin came into view as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the modest structure. Clara stepped down, taking it in the slanted porch. The split-rail fence, the stack of chopped wood leaning against the barn. Beyond, the canyon dropped away, wild and untamed. She didn't comment, just nodded once. All right then, she said, voice low. Let's get on with it. Inside, the single room welcomed us with warmth from the banked fire. Bed under the window, stove in the hearth, table with 2 chairs I'd whittled years back. Sparse, but solid. Clara crossed the threshold first, her fingers brushing the rough-hewn door frame, then trailing over the basin's edge, the windowsill's worn wood, claiming space without a word. I watched from the doorway, noting how she moved deliberate, unafraid. She didn't ask about sleeping arrangements. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and headed for the cupboard. Where's the flour? Second shelf. Left, she nodded, and soon the scent of biscuits filled the air. That night, we shared venison stew. I'd simmered earlier, the meat tender from slow cooking, over the fire. The crackling flames mirrored the tentative warmth building between us, not fire, yet, just embers. We ate in silence at first, forks scraping plates, but then she glanced up. You build this place yourself? I nodded, chewing slow. After the war, took a season and a half, rose from the ashes of what was left of me. Her eyes held mine a beat longer, something flickering their understanding. Maybe, or curiosity matching my own. She didn't press, just finished her meal and washed the dishes while I checked the latch. The fire died low, and she paused, drying a bowl, staring into the dark beyond the window. Still standing, she murmured, almost to herself. I looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, wondered if she carried her own ruins. She stacked the plates neat, then turned to the spare cot in the corner. I'll take this, if it's all right. There was room in the bed, I could have said, but the words stuck. Suit yourself. I turned down the lamp, stoked the coals, and lay in the dark, listening to her breathe. The canyon wind whispered secrets outside, and I felt a pull-a-tamo ache to know her story, to see if her strength could mend the cracks in mine. Spring unfolded slow in Shadow Canyon, granting permissions in whispers, an extra hour of light, patches of earth loosening their grip on frost, the trill of a stubborn bird defying the chill. The ground held its cold, but the silence shattered bit by bit, and so did ours. Clara rose with the dawn, moving through the cabin like she'd always been, there quiet, but making room. She boiled water before I stirred, left my coffee black and strong, just how I took it. No surprise in her eyes at the cold snaps, or the window drafts, or the ache in her own frame that seemed etched from years of endurance. I worked the fence lines against prowling coyotes, coming back muddied and weary. only to find my boots warmed by the fire, or kindling stacked precise. I didn't ask. Some thanks were in the doing. On the third morning after her arrival, I woke to an empty cabin. The cot was made neat, door ajar. Panic flicked sharp in my chest. Had she gone? Then I spotted her beyond the trees, in the shallow stream that threaded the canyon floor. Barefoot, skirt hiked, face tilted to the sky. The water ran slow, thawed at edges, brave in the middle. I didn't call out, just walked to the bank and waited. Used to do this as a girl, she said, eyes still upward. Stand in running water, remind myself it don't stop for nobody, not storms, not men, not grief. I watched the current curl around her ankles, cold and unyielding. It mirrored the frozen parts of me I'd long ignored. She turned then, gaze open, not shy. I don't need saving, Elijah, I know. We stood there, sun filtering through pines, water rushing like time. When she stepped out, boots in hand, she brushed past me, leaving footprints in the soft mud. I followed them home, that flicker in my chest, growing curiosity twisting into something warmer. Unspoken dot by mid-spring. The canyon shook off its frost, air smelling of green shoots and wet bark. The cabin felt woven into the land now, not just a shelter. Clara planted with intention beans, potatoes, herbs in rows that matched her steady breath. I watched her sometimes, hands in soil, and felt a pull, like the earth calling to something buried in me. I whittled a sturdy latch for the barn door, sanding edges smooth as quiet amends for my rough edges. Her presence warmed the returns from the fields, not just food or fire, but her there, steady as the canyon walls. The nightmares crept back that month, not the screaming ones, but the empty voids where everything vanished. The sparse orchard I'd planted for Sarah, her voice fading, the weight of loss crushing. One night, I woke to muffled weeping, not mine. Clara on the cot, curled tight, trying to hide it. I didn't move, didn't intrude. Instead, I stirred the fire, added logs, let the glow chase shadows. When it quieted, silence wrapped us again. Come morning, an extra mug waited on the table, her scarf folded by my coat, gestures, pulling me closer. Later that week, by the stream again, she stared at the water, thought if I stood long enough, it might carry something away. I didn't ask what, just stood beside her, boots planted. Sometimes it does. Sometimes, she echoed, and in that word, I heard echoes of my own healing, slow, tentative. Danger struck with the thaws, full force. A pack of wolves, gaunt from winter, scented our livestock and attacked at dusk. Their howls pierced the air as they lunged at the pen, eyes glowing feral. I grabbed my rifle, bursting out the door. Get back. I fired into the fray, the crack echoing off canyon walls. One wolf fell, but another leaped, jaws snapping, tearing a deep gash in my arm. Pain exploded, blood hot on my sleeve, but I swung the butt, driving them off. Staggering back inside, I collapsed by the fire. Clara was there in an instant, ripping cloths for bandages, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. Hold still, she murmured, cleaning the wound with whiskey that burned like fire. Her touch was gentle, fingers lingering a moment longer than needed, sending a jolt through me, not just pain, but something electric, stirring emotions I'd buried. As she wrapped it, our eyes met, vulnerability raw. You could have been killed, she whispered. I nodded, voice gruff. But I wasn't, thanks to you. That night, the bond tightened amid the peril, curiosity blooming into a deeper pull, my heart whispering possibilities I'd long denied. June brought heat that clung like a lover's breath, thick with growths, hum cicadas, wild grass swaying. We fell into rhythm. I fixed warped fences under the sun's glare. She scrubbed the porch with vinegar, our days wordless but harmonious, not tender yet, but steady and in the frontier. Steadiness was gold. The storm hit on a Sunday, sky shifting dark without warning. Thunder clapped like cannon fire, shaking rafters. I secured the barn quick, latched shutters, stoked the fire. Clara lit lamps, hands trembling slightly as lightning flashed. Her jaw set tight, shoulders locked, eyes far off. Dark. I poured water, set it on the table, sat nearby. Rain hammered down. Finally, her voice, small but sure. It was storms that night,